I refused to share my dad's inheritance with my step-siblings. It's a decision I'll never forget. My dad passed away unexpectedly, and just when I thought the worst was behind me, I was thrown into a nightmare. My mom had remarried years ago, and while I had always gotten along with my step-siblings, I never imagined that after my dad's death, I'd be faced with a moral dilemma that would tear my family apart. When my step-siblings came knocking, asking for their share of my dad's inheritance, I was faced with a decision that I never thought I'd have to make. Do I share what I inherited with them, or do I hold my ground? What I did next shocked everyone, including myself. The phone call came on a Saturday afternoon, and I thought it was just another one of those random calls that you don't expect to be important. But it was the worst call of my life. My mom, on the other end of the line, was crying so hard that I could barely understand her at first. It took a while for her to get the words out, but when she did, they hit me like a ton of bricks. "Your dad, he's gone." I froze. My heart stopped, and I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I hadn't spoken to my dad in a couple of months. Life had gotten busy, and we weren't the best at keeping in touch, but this wasn't something I expected. He was healthy, strong. There were no signs. And yet, in an instant, my world was flipped upside down. I rushed to my mom's house, where she was waiting with her head in her hands. I could see that she was devastated, but I also noticed the look in her eyes. It was a mix of grief and something else, something I couldn't place just yet. The next few days were a blur. We made funeral arrangements, and I tried to comfort my mom as best as I could. But during the process, something strange started happening. My step-siblings, who I hadn't heard from much in recent years, started to reach out. At first, I thought they were just checking in, offering condolences, trying to show support. But when we sat down with the lawyer to go through my dad's will, I quickly realized they had other plans. They were expecting a part of his inheritance. The lawyer's office was stuffy, and the air felt thick with tension as we gathered around the table. My mom, still in a haze of grief, sat beside me, looking exhausted. My step-siblings, on the other hand, were dressed to impress. They wore these tight smiles that seemed more rehearsed than genuine. I could tell something was coming, but I didn't know what. The lawyer, an older man with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat and began to read through the will. He went over the usual stuff, assigning a few small belongings, designating some minor assets to charity, things like that. But when it came to the section about the inheritance, my step-siblings leaned forward, their eyes wide with anticipation. The lawyer stopped and looked up at us. "And now for the estate," he began. "As per the wishes of Mr. Thompson, all financial assets, property, and investments are to be left to his biological child, insert my name, to manage and distribute as they see fit." The air in the room went still. I glanced at my step-siblings. They were staring at the lawyer with disbelief, their faces turning an unhealthy shade of red. I could see it in their eyes. This wasn't the outcome they had been hoping for. My older stepsister, Amanda, was the first to speak. "Wait, so that means we don't get anything?" Her voice was high-pitched, her frustration barely contained. I didn't know how to respond. My father's will had been clear, and I had always thought my relationship with my dad was strong. Sure, he'd remarried when I was younger, but it didn't mean that my step-siblings were entitled to a portion of his inheritance. My dad had made his wishes clear. Everything was mine to manage. "I'm afraid not," the lawyer said gently. "Your father was very specific in his wishes." I felt the heat rise to my cheeks. I could see Amanda's hand ball into a fist as she glanced at me, her eyes narrowing. I was trying to focus on what the lawyer was saying next, but I could already feel the tension building between us. "Let's not jump to conclusions," the lawyer continued. "There will be more details discussed in time regarding how assets will be handled and any specific requests your father made about property distribution." But that was it. The damage had already been done. My step-siblings were looking at me with a mixture of confusion, anger, and even resentment. I had become the person who held all the cards, and I could already tell that things were going to get much more complicated from here. The days following the reading of the will were tense. My step-siblings didn't speak to me directly, but their actions said everything I needed to know. Amanda kept texting my mom, asking if there was any way she could get a share of the inheritance. My younger stepsister, Rachel, posted a cryptic status on social media, something about family not knowing how to share and karma. I wasn't sure if she was talking about me, but it felt personal. The The guilt started to creep in. Part of me felt like I should have done something to soften the blow for them, maybe offered them a small portion of the inheritance, just to keep the peace. But then I reminded myself that this wasn't about me. This was my dad's decision. He had worked hard for his money, and he chose to leave it to me. My step-siblings had no legal claim to any of it. Still, the pressure weighed on me. My mom, caught in the middle of it all, wasn't much help. She had always been the peacemaker, trying to avoid conflict, and now she was trying to play both sides. Every time I saw her, she would ask if I had spoken to Amanda or Rachel, if I could work something out with them. But I knew deep down, it wasn't that simple. Things came to a head one evening when I received a phone call from Amanda. I hadn't heard from her directly since the reading of the will, and I wasn't sure what to expect. When I answered, she didn't waste any time. "You know this isn't over, right?" she said, her voice tight with anger. "Dad may have left everything to you, but we're family. You can't just ignore us. You think you're going to get away with this?" My heart raced. "Amanda, I'm not trying to get away with anything. This is what Dad wanted." "That's easy for you to say," she shot back, "but we're his family too. We've been there for him, through everything, and now you're acting like we don't exist." I tried to stay calm, but it was hard. "I'm not taking anything from you. I didn't ask for this, Amanda. This is what Dad decided." She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, it was in a tone I didn't recognize, soft, almost pleading. "I'm just asking for something, anything. It's not fair. I have bills, I have a family to take care of. Can't you see that?" There it was, the guilt again. My heart softened at her words. I knew she had financial struggles, but that didn't change the fact that the inheritance wasn't mine to split. But hearing her desperation made it harder to stand firm. "I can't just give you a share of Dad's inheritance," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "This isn't something I can negotiate." There was a long pause before Amanda spoke again. "Fine, but don't think this is over. You can't hide behind the will forever. One day, you'll have to face us." I didn't know what to say after that. It wasn't a threat, but it felt like one. It felt like the beginning of a storm that I wasn't ready for. I ended the conversation, my hands trembling as I put the phone down. After that conversation with Amanda, things started to escalate quickly. My step-siblings didn't just keep their feelings to themselves anymore. They began to make it known to everyone. I got calls from relatives, some of whom I hadn't heard from in years, asking about the inheritance. They weren't directly accusing me of anything, but the insinuations were clear. "You know, family should stick together in times like this. Maybe you could do something for them, just to keep the peace." It felt like I was being pulled in every direction, and no matter what I did, I couldn't win. Even my mom started to apply pressure, though in a more subtle way. She would ask me if I was sure about my decision to keep everything to myself. "You know they're struggling, don't you? They've always been there for your dad. Maybe you should think about helping them out." I loved my mom, but this was too much. She was trying to play peacemaker, and while I understood that, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was making me feel guilty for something I didn't do. My dad made his choice clear, and I had to respect it. But the guilt was starting to eat away at me. I didn't want to be the bad guy in this situation, but no matter how much I tried to explain to my mom that it wasn't my fault, she kept pushing me to consider my step-siblings. One day, after yet another conversation with my mom, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to have a direct conversation with Amanda and Rachel. No more phone calls, no more indirect comments from relatives. I needed to stand my ground and put an end to the constant pressure. I called Amanda, my nerves on edge. She answered quickly as if she'd been waiting for the call. "Are we doing this now?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've had enough of the guilt trips, Amanda. I need to tell you how I feel." "Go ahead," she said, almost daring me. "I'm not sharing the inheritance," I stated, my voice firm. "I know you're upset, and I get that, but this is not something I can just give away. Dad left it to me, and I'm honoring his wishes." There was a long silence, and for a moment, I thought maybe she would back down. But when she spoke again, her voice was filled with a quiet, simmering anger. "You don't get it, do you?" Amanda said. "This isn't just about money. It's about family. You're acting like you're the only one who mattered to Dad. Like we weren't even part of his life. You're selfish." Her words hit me hard, harder than I expected. I knew she was hurt, but the way she was framing it made me feel like I had done something wrong by accepting what was left to me. It wasn't about selfishness. It was about respecting my dad's wishes. I wasn't taking anything from her or Rachel. I was simply following what my dad had laid out. Look, I said, trying to keep calm. This is not about not being a part of the family. You and Rachel are family, but Dad made his choice. I didn't ask for this. Amanda was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I don't think you understand how much this is tearing us apart. My stomach twisted. I wasn't sure if she was talking about our relationship or the entire family dynamic, but I didn't want to continue down this road. I don't want this to tear us apart, Amanda, I said, my voice softer. But I can't keep compromising. I have to make decisions that feel right for me, too. The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. Finally, Amanda spoke again. You know, you've changed. You've always been so easygoing, and now you're just different. I don't know who you are anymore. It was like a punch to the gut. I had always prided myself on being understanding and considerate, but in that moment, I realized that sometimes standing up for yourself made you look like the villain. The conversation with Amanda left me shaken. Her words kept echoing in my mind. You've changed. I don't know who you are anymore. It felt like a slap in the face, especially because I hadn't changed. I was still the same person I always was, just someone who was learning to set boundaries. But hearing that from her, someone who had always been a part of my life, made me question whether I was doing the right thing. The guilt came back, creeping in like a shadow. I had done what I thought was best for myself, but now I was starting to wonder if I had been too harsh. Was I really being selfish? Was I really betraying my family by respecting my dad's wishes? I spent days going back and forth in my head, trying to justify my decision while also wondering if I could find some middle ground. But there was no turning back now. My step-siblings weren't giving up, and my mom was still trying to convince me to reconsider. The tension in the family was so thick I could feel it whenever we all gathered for anything, even casual dinners. My mom would look at me with disappointment, and my step-siblings would shoot me icy glares. It was clear that the rift was widening, and it didn't seem like there was a way to fix it. I didn't hear from Amanda or Rachel for a week, and it felt like a heavy weight was hanging between us. I kept thinking that if I reached out, things might smooth over, but every time I picked up the phone, I hesitated. Would they just see it as weakness? Would I be giving in? No matter how much I wanted to reach out, I knew I had to hold firm. This wasn't about me. It was about respecting my dad's legacy. Then, one evening out of the blue, I got a call from Rachel. Hey, she said, sounding surprisingly calm. I wanted to talk. I hadn't expected her to reach out, but I was relieved. Maybe this would finally be the conversation where we could talk things through. Sure, I said, taking a deep breath. What's on your mind? I just wanted to say, I get it now, she said. I was angry at first, but I realized that what you're doing is honoring Dad's wishes. I guess I just didn't want to admit that he chose you for a reason. I don't know how I would have felt if the situation were reversed. Her voice softened as she spoke, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like there was hope for reconciliation. I didn't mean to make things harder for you, she continued. I think we were both upset about the way things turned out, but it's not fair to put that on you. I was taken aback. Rachel had always been the quieter one, not one to confront people directly. But hearing her say this, hearing her admit that she understood, was a huge step. It was as if the ice was starting to crack, and maybe, just maybe, we could work through this. I'm glad you reached out, Rachel, I said, my voice sincere. I know this is hard, and I didn't want things to get like this. I just wanted to follow Dad's wishes, but I never wanted to hurt anyone. I know, she replied, and I think I was just looking for someone to blame. But I see now that we're all just grieving in different ways. I'm sorry for everything I said. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It's going to take some time, but I'm really glad we're talking. There was a brief pause before she spoke again. Yeah, me too. Maybe we can start fresh. After Rachel reached out, things began to shift in ways I wasn't expecting. While I still wasn't sure about how Amanda was feeling, I could sense that Rachel's message was a genuine turning point. For the first time in weeks, I felt like there was a chance for us to rebuild what had been broken. It wasn't going to happen overnight, but I was willing to take the first steps. I started spending more time with Rachel, just the two of us. We went out for coffee, talked about the kids, life, and what we were both going through. Slowly, I saw the person I had known growing up, someone who genuinely cared about her family, even if she didn't always know how to show it. We didn't discuss the inheritance right away, but every time we met, I could feel the distance between us narrowing. I wasn't sure where things would go with Amanda, but Rachel's willingness to meet me halfway gave me hope. But despite this progress, the guilt lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being selfish for holding on to the inheritance. I kept hearing my mom's voice in my head, urging me to find some way to share, to make everyone feel included. Was it really worth all the tension and heartache if I stuck to my decision? I found myself questioning it more and more. Maybe I could have done something different, found a way to make it work for everyone. Then, a week after Rachel and I had that conversation, I received a message from Amanda. It was brief, but to the point. We need to talk. I immediately felt a sense of dread wash over me. Had she come around? Or was she about to demand a bigger share of the inheritance? I wasn't sure, but I agreed to meet her. The whole week leading up to that meeting, I couldn't focus on anything. I kept rehearsing what I would say, but nothing felt right. Was I supposed to apologize? Was I supposed to stick to my guns? I honestly didn't know. When the day finally arrived, I showed up to the coffee shop early, hoping to gather my thoughts. Amanda arrived not long after, looking just as tense as I felt. She didn't waste time getting to the point. "I've been thinking," she said, sitting down across from me. "I've been a real pain about this whole inheritance thing. I was angry, and I took it out on you. I guess I didn't understand everything at the time." I sat back, surprised by her openness. Was this an apology? Was she ready to move forward? "I've been trying to come to terms with it," Amanda continued, "and I've realized something. I shouldn't have expected anything from you. Dad made his decision, and I can't change that." My heart felt like it was lifting in my chest. This wasn't the confrontation I had feared. She wasn't demanding anything. She was acknowledging the situation and, more importantly, acknowledging me. "I understand now," she said softly. "I've always been the one to stir things up, and I've caused more problems than I solved. I'm sorry for that. And I'm sorry for everything I said to you." I didn't know what to say at first. It was like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I had been bracing myself for another argument, but instead, Amanda was offering me an olive branch. "You don't have to apologize," I said, my voice steady. "I know you were hurt, but I want you to know I never meant to make things worse. I just didn't know how to handle it." She smiled, and for the first time in what felt like forever, we were both able to just be ourselves. There was no bitterness, no anger, just understanding. "We're family," she said quietly, "and I want us to get past this. It's not about the money, it's about us, our relationship." I felt a surge of emotion. The past weeks had been some of the hardest in my life, but now, in this moment, it felt like things were finally starting to come together. As the weeks went by, things between Amanda and me slowly started to improve. I won't lie, it wasn't easy. There were still awkward silences when we saw each other at family gatherings, but it felt like we were moving in the right direction. I could tell that Amanda was trying to work through her feelings, and I was doing my best to be patient with her. I wasn't sure if everything could go back to normal, but I was cautiously optimistic. Rachel and I kept in touch too. The more we talked, the more I saw that she wasn't just the quiet sibling I had thought her to be. She had a lot to say, a lot of feelings she had been holding back. The dynamic between us had changed, and while we weren't best friends, I felt like I was finally seeing the real Rachel. It was about a month after my conversation with Amanda that I got a call from my mom. She told me that Amanda wanted to have a family dinner. At first, I was hesitant. It felt like too much too soon, and I wasn't sure if it was the right time, but my mom insisted. "It'll be good for everyone," she said. "We need to try and move forward." I agreed, but I was still anxious. Would it be uncomfortable? Would we fall back into the old patterns of resentment and guilt? The thought weighed heavily on me, but I couldn't avoid it forever. If we were going to rebuild our relationship, it was time to face each other. The night of the dinner came, and I walked into my mom's house feeling a mixture of nervousness and determination. The table was set for 6, and as soon as I entered, I saw Amanda and Rachel already sitting down, looking somewhat awkward but trying their best to seem casual. My mom was bustling around the kitchen, making last-minute preparations. We greeted each other with tentative smiles, but it wasn't until we sat down that I realized just how much we had to work through. The air was thick with unspoken words. We ate in silence for the first few minutes, the clinking of forks and knives, the only sound breaking the tension. Finally, Amanda broke the silence. "I want to apologize again," she said, her voice quiet but sincere. "I've been thinking about everything, and I was wrong. I let my anger get the best of me, and I shouldn't have taken it out on you. I know you were just following Dad's wishes, but I was too focused on what I didn't get." I wasn't expecting her to say that, at least not so openly. Her honesty caught me off guard. For the first time since all of this started, I felt like she truly understood. She wasn't just apologizing to smooth things over. She was taking responsibility for her actions. "Thank you, Amanda," I said, my voice soft. "I know you were hurt, and I get it. It's been a tough time for all of us. But I really appreciate that you're trying to move past it." Rachel, who had been quietly listening, nodded in agreement. "Yeah, we all have our moments where we're not proud of what we've said or done, but I think we've all learned something about each other through this." There was a long pause, but this time, it didn't feel awkward. It felt like something had shifted. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The rest of the dinner went by with fewer tense moments. We laughed, reminisced, and shared stories about Dad. Nothing heavy, just simple moments. But I could tell that everyone at the table was a little lighter. The weight that had been on us all was slowly beginning to lift, one conversation at a time. After that dinner, things between us began to change in ways I hadn't expected. There was no grand resolution or sudden shift, but I noticed small changes in how we interacted. Amanda and I began to talk more openly, without the lingering resentment that had been there before. We started discussing our lives more, laughing at old family stories, and even making plans for the future. It was as if the tension from before was slowly dissolving, replaced by a new understanding between us. Even Rachel and I had become closer. I had no idea how much she had been bottling up until we started spending more time together. We went for walks in the park, had long talks over coffee, and began to rebuild our bond. She wasn't the quiet sibling anymore. She had things to say, opinions to share, and I found myself enjoying our conversations more than I thought I would. But there was still something in the back of my mind, something that reminded me that all of this had been possible because I had made a decision that nobody expected me to make. I had refused to share the inheritance, and in doing so, I had pushed my family to confront their feelings about it. But what if I had been too harsh? What if I had ruined the family bond forever? One evening, after a particularly heartfelt conversation with Rachel, I sat down to think about everything that had happened. I thought about the months of tension, the fights, and the guilt. And then I thought about the conversations we were having now, how we were starting to heal. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. We were no longer just ignoring the elephant in the room. We were facing it together. But then my phone buzzed, and I saw that it was a text from Amanda. I felt a little anxiety rise in my chest, but I opened it anyway. "I've been thinking about everything. I know I can't change what's happened, but I want you to know that I've been proud of how you've handled all of this. You didn't back down, and even though it hurt at first, I see now that you were just doing what was best for all of us. Thank you for sticking to your decisions, even when it was hard." I read the message several times, unsure of how to respond. It wasn't just an apology, it was an acknowledgement of the hard decisions I'd made. For the first time, Amanda was recognizing that my choice wasn't out of selfishness, but out of respect for what my dad had left behind, and that meant everything to me. I quickly typed back, "I'm glad we're starting to move forward. It hasn't been easy, but I appreciate you saying that. I think we can make it through this, together." I hit send, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. It wasn't perfect, and there would still be bumps along the way, but I was confident that we could rebuild our relationship. We could all move forward. A few weeks after the dinner, things were starting to feel more like they used to. The awkwardness between Amanda and me was mostly gone, and Rachel and I were spending more time together, catching up on lost moments. But then, the true test came in the form of a family gathering. It was my mom's birthday, and she had invited everyone over to celebrate. She wanted to have a happy, drama-free gathering, which sounded simple enough. But I knew deep down that this was going to be a delicate situation. After all that had happened with the inheritance, could we all really put the past behind us? Was it too soon to pretend that everything was normal? I didn't know what to expect, but I showed up anyway, determined to make things work. When I walked into the living room, I immediately saw Amanda and Rachel sitting on the couch, chatting with my mom. There was a tense energy in the air, but it wasn't as thick as it used to be. No one was glaring, no one was avoiding eye contact. Maybe, just maybe, we were finally past the worst of it. As I walked in, my mom's face lit up. "There you are," she said, waving me over to sit next to her. "I'm so glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, trying to keep my voice light. I was nervous, but I didn't want my mom to sense it. The first hour or so of the gathering went smoothly. We ate, talked, and reminisced about old family trips. For the first time in what felt like forever, the atmosphere was actually enjoyable. No passive-aggressive comments, no awkward silences, just good old-fashioned family time. But then, out of nowhere, Amanda dropped a bombshell. "You know," she started casually, "I was thinking about Dad's old car, the one that's sitting in the garage. I've always loved that car, and I think it'd be nice to have it. What do you think?" She looked directly at me. The room fell silent. I could hear the air get thick again as my mom looked back and forth between Amanda and me. My heart was pounding in my chest. I wasn't expecting this. After everything we had been through, was she seriously asking for something else? Was this just another way to ask for a piece of Dad's estate? I could feel my hands getting clammy. The tension in the room was palpable. Everyone was looking at me, waiting for my response. It wasn't about the car, it was about testing boundaries. My sister was testing whether I was really serious about sticking to Dad's wishes, or if I'd back down. I took a deep breath. "I don't think Dad would have wanted the car to go to anyone else," I said firmly. "It's a sentimental piece, and I'm planning to keep it. I'm sorry, Amanda, but that's how it's going to be." There was a long pause. I could see Amanda's jaw tighten, and her face flushed with frustration. My mom shifted uncomfortably in her seat, clearly feeling the tension building again. Amanda didn't say anything for a while, but I could see that she was fuming. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. I had made the right decision, hadn't I? Was I being too harsh? The last thing I wanted was for this to escalate into another fight. After what seemed like an eternity, Amanda finally spoke. "Fine," she said, her voice tight. "I guess it's your choice." The conversation quickly moved on to other topics, but I could feel the underlying tension still lingering. I had stood my ground, but I wasn't sure if that was the right call. Would this small conflict undo all the progress we had made? Would Amanda be upset with me again? I wasn't sure what the next few weeks would bring, but in that moment, I realized that there would always be challenges ahead. We were healing, but the process would never be perfect. A week after the family gathering, I still felt the lingering effects of the conversation about the car. It hadn't exploded into a huge argument, but the tension was unmistakable. I could tell Amanda wasn't happy with my decision, and that unease remained in the air. I had stuck to my guns, but there was still that nagging feeling that maybe I'd pushed too hard. I kept replaying the conversation in my head. Had I made a mistake by not compromising? Was there a middle ground that I could have found to keep the peace? It wasn't about the car, not really. It was about the boundaries I had set, the limits I had drawn. And though I knew I had been right, it didn't make it any easier. That's when I decided to reach out to Amanda again. I didn't want to let the silence and unspoken tension build up. If we were ever going to get past this, I had to take the first step. I needed to show her that I was willing to move forward, that I was still there for her, even if we disagreed on certain things. I sent her a text. "Hey, I've been thinking about our conversation. I just want to say that I respect you, and I know you're frustrated, but I think we should talk it out. Maybe get some things cleared up. I don't want this to keep coming between us." A few hours later, she replied, "Maybe you're right. We do need to talk." We set up a time to meet at a coffee shop the next day. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew this conversation was going to be the defining moment for our relationship moving forward. When I walked into the coffee shop, Amanda was already sitting at a table by the window. Her expression was neutral, but there was a softness to her demeanor that I hadn't seen in a while. I sat down across from her, and we both took a deep breath, ready to have the conversation that had been hanging over us for weeks. "I've been thinking a lot," Amanda said, breaking the silence first. "About the car, about everything. And I realize I've been holding on to something that wasn't mine to begin with. I guess I've just been upset about Dad's death and how everything changed so quickly. It's been hard for me." I could see the genuine remorse in her eyes, and it hit me that this wasn't just about the car. It was about everything, the grief, the loss, the changes that had come after Dad's passing. Amanda hadn't known how to deal with all of it, and her frustration had been misdirected at me. "I get it, Amanda. I said, my voice soft. I really do. Losing Dad has been hard on all of us. I didn't want to make things worse, but I couldn't compromise on what he wanted either. I'm not trying to take anything from you. I just want to honor his memory. She nodded slowly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I know, and I shouldn't have taken my anger out on you. I've been looking for something to blame, but the truth is, I don't even know how to grieve properly. I've been a mess, and I didn't know who to turn to. I felt a wave of compassion for her. I'd been so focused on my own feelings that I hadn't truly considered what Amanda had been going through. She wasn't just angry about the inheritance, she was dealing with the loss of our dad in her own way, and it was much more complicated than I had realized. I'm here for you, Amanda, I said, feeling the weight lift off my shoulders. I know we don't always see eye to eye, but we're family. We can work through this, together. She smiled, and for the first time in a long while, I saw the sister I remembered. She wasn't angry or defensive anymore. She was just a woman who was grieving, trying to find her way. I'm sorry for everything, for all the things I said, Amanda said, her voice cracking. I just want us to be okay. We will be, I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. It might take time, but we'll figure it out. It's strange how life has a way of forcing us to grow through difficult situations. The journey with my step-siblings has been a roller coaster of emotions, from anger to guilt to acceptance. But through it all, I've learned that setting boundaries doesn't mean you don't care. It means you're choosing to protect yourself and others, even when it's uncomfortable. I don't know what the future holds for our family, but one thing I've learned is that communication and understanding are key. We all make mistakes, but it's never too late to mend relationships and move forward. If you've ever found yourself in a similar situation where family dynamics are put to the test, I'd love to hear your thoughts. How did you navigate tough conversations? How did you rebuild relationships after a fallout? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if you found this story relatable or helpful, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content. Life is messy, but we're all in this together. Let's keep the conversation going.